Hi, my name's Joey. I'm an organizer here at WPEA, and today we're going to talk about position descriptions and position reviews. So first, let's define what is a position description. A position description is a document that outlines the duties, hours, qualifications, and all the other requirements and expectations of a specific job position within an organization. It provides a detailed overview of the role, and it also serves as a really important reference document for both the employer and the employee. Position descriptions must also use either the standard form that's provided by Washington State Office of Financial Management, we often call them OFM, or they have to use a similar form that follows that same format. You can find blank forms and sample forms from OFM at this link if you want to play along. Now, position descriptions can be really difficult to create considering how varied most of our positions are. And it's for this reason that OFM provides a detailed guide on recommendations for developing a position description. And you can find that guide here, but I'm going to go over some highlights from this guide. So, a position description is generally separated into 8 sections. I'll give you a list first, and then we'll overview each one. So there is a position objective, there are assigned work activities, sometimes these are called duties and tasks. There are supervisory responsibilities, working relationships, continuity of operations designation. Sometimes we call continuity of operations COOP. So your COOP designation, your working conditions, your qualifications, and also any special requirements. So the assigned work activities is a really big one. It's where the bulk of the document exists. And the other 7 are, like, I can summarize them in a single sentence. They're much shorter. So I'm going to go over those first 7 initially, and then we'll come back to the assigned work activities. So the position objective, that's usually just a few sentences to provide an overview of the position and how it relates to the rest of the organization. The supervisory responsibilities section, it's going to detail if you supervise any positions, what their titles are, and what their schedules are. So that way you can relate it later when you see your own schedule in that same document. The working relationships section goes in the other direction. So it details how much your direct supervisor is going to oversee the completion of your tasks. And that is a multiple choice thing. There's only 4 choices, moving from they watch you all the time and they check all of your work to they pretty much never watch you, and you do have to follow general policies or laws, but you're kind of free rein. And so working relationship just details which one of those you follow. The continuity of operations or COOP designation is where you'll see if you're required to work during suspended operations or during any other emergency scenario. It's important to remember that if you are required to work during one of these scenarios, you're entitled to premium pay, so make sure you get paid. The working conditions section outlines your general work setting. It's going to be like an office or out in the field. It's also going to list any hazards related to that common work environment. It's going to show your regular hours, your schedule, and you're also going to have in the working conditions section any travel requirements, the tools and equipment that the employer is required to provide for you, and your expected level of interaction with either the general public or customers or whatever they call it for your institution or your department. The last 2 sections before we get to the working assignments are qualifications and special requirements. They're both kind of similar. Qualifications are going to list any degrees, experience, abilities, or any other qualification that, while not required, is preferred. The special requirements section, on the other hand, is going to list any required certifications, licensure, or any additional requirements of the position that aren't listed elsewhere. So let's go back and let's talk about the assigned work activities, sometimes called duties and tasks. This section is the most vital piece of the document. They describe the tasks that you will be required to complete in your job. Whenever we navigate any disciplinary action related to performance, this is the first place that we look. This is also the first place that we look when considering a position review. The way that these duties are written is very vital because you want to make sure that the language that you're using to describe the duties is both accurate and that the terms used are terms which have a specific definition. Statements describing a duty should always start with a clear action verb taken from this OFM guide. Now, a clear action verb is going to denote if that duty interacts with people, with data, or with physical objects. After starting with your clear action verb, you want to make sure to use terms that match a definition that you're intending. Now, there aren't glossaries for every single classification. For example, in higher ed, when we say a transcript, it's kind of implied what transcript we're talking about. However, if you are in a supervisory role or if you are in an IT-based role, those two groups have terms which mean a bunch of different things. Like IT specifically, if we say a library, there are multiple definitions for what a library could mean. And it's for that purpose that OFM publishes glossaries to use for that specific purpose. So here's the glossary for the supervisors and another glossary for IT workers. So you want to reference those glossaries if you fall into one of those categories and make sure that the terminology that you're using matches the definition that you're intending. And so because they're so complex, a lot of position descriptions that we see do not start with clear action verbs, and they also don't use terms that match up with the glossaries and the definitions when we're talking with members. It doesn't accurately describe the work. And because these duty statements are so often written incorrectly by supervisors, because they are required to be written by your supervisor, this can lead to a lot of difficulties over time. So please read your position description, reference the linked documentation, check your supervisor's work, and make sure that your position is correctly built and described. If you find any discrepancies, please reach out to your representative or your steward to make sure that it is addressed. Now, when you have a position description that is appropriately built, even with a properly built position description, over the years, your duties may change. And as those duties change over time, that position description should be regularly reviewed and updated to reflect those changes. We recommend that this process take place alongside your annual performance evaluation, which is required by the contract. If your duties change significantly, then your position may not match your original classification and pay range. And that would then require a position review and possibly a reclassification. A position review can be initiated by either the employer or the employee. And once a position review is filed with your HR department, your back pay, should you be reclassified, is dated to that original filing date where HR date stamped your filed paperwork. Position reviews are required to be completed within a set timeline, which is stated in your contract. And this timeline is typically 60 to 90 days, depending on which contract you fall under. Now, if you disagree with the outcome of your position review, you can file for what's called a director's determination, which is handled by a sub-department inside of the Office of Financial Management, or which we call OFM. And if you disagree with that outcome as well, you can then file an appeal with the Personnel Resources Board. Now, both of these secondary processes, the director's determination and the appeal to the Personnel Resources Board, both of those are governed by Washington state law. And as such, details about the process can be found written in the relevant Washington Administrative Code, call it WAC, chapters that are listed here. So you can find that OFM has a guide which provides these links and a few extras, but then there's also, here's the WAC for your director's determination and your PRB appeal, just in general. Now, because of the complex nature of position reviews and the vital importance of documentation, we highly recommend that you reach out to your representative and your steward team if you or your supervisor are contemplating filing a position review in the future. And the biggest reason for this is because while the contract requires position reviews to be completed within 60 to 90 days, depending on the contract, if you disagree with it, that director's determination does not have a set timeline, nor does the appeal process with PRB. And we've seen that if you begin that initial position review and you go through all three processes, that full time can take a year to a year and a half. And you want to make sure, because every step in that process relies on the original filing paperwork that you filed with HR and they date stamped. You cannot add any new information. You have to work with what's there. So having a staff representative and a steward on your side to help create that documentation, even if it's your supervisor that's trying to do it, can be very helpful to making sure that you're successful, because it could be a long process. So in summary, position descriptions are really vital documents. They outline your duties, qualifications, and expectations of a specific job role. They have to follow a standard format using either the format provided by OFM or something similar. The key components of a position description include a position objective, assigned work activities, which is the bulk of it, supervisory responsibilities, working relationships, continuity of operations designation, working conditions, qualifications, and any special requirements. It's important that these position descriptions accurately reflect the current duties and responsibilities of the role, because they serve as a basis for performance evaluations and for potential position reclassification. If you believe that your position no longer aligns with your actual job duties, then you or your supervisor can initiate the position review process. And the position review process is governed both by your union contract, but also by state law. And it's highly recommended to involve your staff rep or a steward when going through a position review, because it can be really complex and documentation is very critical. So remember, keeping your position up to date, your position description up to date is very important. It's a very important part of ensuring that you are properly classified and you are correctly compensated for the work that you do. If you have any questions or concerns about your position description, please contact your staff representative for guidance. As always, if you don't know your staff representative or your stewards, you can find them, your staff representative, at wpea.org/contact us. And you can find your steward team by going to wpea.org/units. As always, my name is Joey. I'm an organizer here at WPEA. And if you liked this training, or if you have ideas for a different training that you'd like me to create, then feel free to send me an email at joey@wpea.org. And I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us today, and I hope to see you in the future. Have a great day. Bye.